Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Meet Your Mission. My name is Kalyna White, and I'm a manager with GTSC's Homeland Security today. I recently graduated college and have since become really interested in the many missions of Homeland Security and the many career paths available to those of us who are entering the workforce. So I've been lucky enough to be talking with different officials and people who have worked at many different missions of Homeland Security. So today I'm fortunate enough to speak with Mr. Michael Daniel. He is the current president and CEO of the Cyber Threat Alliance, and he was the former special assistant to President Obama and the cybersecurity coordinator on the National Security Council staff. So he knows all about cyber, and we're really excited to talk with him today. So, Mr. Daniel, your position within government, what did that exactly mean?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to chat and talk, particularly with those that are trying to get into the workforce and trying to make their first sort of career moves. I know that's a very challenging time for a lot of people, so I'm happy to talk about that. So my position in government was an interesting one, right? Because those policy positions are not often easily categorizable. So it's very hard for me to tell you, you always get the question, well, so tell me about your typical day. Well, I didn't have a typical day. Every day was a little bit different, but you can really break what I was trying to do into sort of three broad areas. Um, what, so um, First of all, I was really working on policy issues, right? So how do we develop good cybersecurity policies, whether that means laws or regulations or budget decisions or anything that you can sort of categorize as policy issues? How do we actually develop those and put in place good policies for cybersecurity across the US government? And how do we ensure that the policies of different agencies are consistent across the US government, which is always a big challenge in a government the size of the US. The second category of activities really revolved around providing advice to senior officials on how to deal with cybersecurity in the geopolitical context, right? How do we think about cybersecurity in the context of our relationship with Russia or with China or Iran or North Korea? How do we actually impose costs on our adversaries so that we are, better able to deal with the cyber threats that we face? So it's really about providing advice, providing information, explaining cybersecurity to people in the White House and other senior positions. And then the last category was incident response. So when bad things happened, helping to coordinate the US government response to those incidents, whether that was a technical response or a political response or combination of all of those. So that was really the three broad areas that I worked on in my last job in government.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit about how cybersecurity has maybe changed since like the early 2000s to now? I know you still work in cyber.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think one of the biggest differences, right, is that in the early 2000s in particular, cybersecurity was really a very technical field that was primarily considered something that was really an offshoot of IT. And it was something that many people really wanted to make sure that it was relegated to the geek in the closet, that they didn't have to actually deal with. And of course, now cybersecurity is a mainstream issue, right? That it's a separate discipline, although it's still very tightly connected to IT. But many people realize that it's not just an IT problem, right? It's a national security problem. It's a homeland security problem. Also it's an economics problem. It's a psychology problem. It's a whole bunch of different issues under that umbrella term of cybersecurity. And so another big difference is now there are actually college programs for people to actually study cybersecurity. That was not true 20 years ago. And so there's also a much greater emphasis now in the industry on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like we're working much harder at expanding the workforce, expanding the type of people that we have in the workforce, and really being much more I would say being much more proactive about that, right? And really looking to how can we bring people into the workforce. I will say the one thing that hasn't changed is we still need more people. We needed more people in the early 2000s, and we still need more people now. So cybersecurity is definitely a field that is growing, and I think will continue to grow for some time.
So since it's changed so much, how did you originally end up in cyber? Or like what was your initial plan when you were graduating college and entering the workforce?
Oh, good grief. My original plan, yeah, that went out the window a long time ago. I the You know, when I graduated from well, when I left graduate school, I knew that I wanted to do policy work in DC, and I knew that I wanted to be in national security and international affairs. And so I ended up getting a job at the Office of Management and Budget, working on national security programs. And I, of course, in the mid 90s, when I came out of graduate school, not many people outside of a very small group within the industry really knew much about cybersecurity. It really wasn't on most people's radar at that point, certainly not mine. Um, it really wasn't until the sort of the mid 2000s that you referenced earlier, that I really became interested in cyber. And that happened because by that point, I was the chief of the intelligence branch at OMB, which meant that I oversaw the budgets and financing for U.S. intelligence agencies like CIA, NSA, and a whole bunch of other parts of the alphabet soup that make up the U.S. intelligence community. And those agencies, particularly CIA and NSA, but all the Department of Defense as a whole, and Department of Homeland Security and others, really began requesting large amounts of money for cybersecurity, both on the defensive side and on the offensive side. And very few people within OMB or the larger White House really understood what these requests were for. Like, what was this? What was this money going to go to? What was it going to do? And so, a few of us really became, well, A, the leadership of OMB asked us to look into it, but B, we became very interested in this issue of like, what are all these resources for? What is this issue? And then, of course, the more I dug into it, the more interesting it became, and I sort of became the de facto um, lead for cybersecurity issues across OMB, not just within the intelligence community, but across all the different agencies. And we actually developed something that we called the cybersecurity crosscut, which is a very budget geeky, nerdy term for figuring out how all the different pots of money in the U.S. government add up to support this issue area called cybersecurity. Um, and it was that work. It was working on all the different aspects of cybersecurity across the U.S. government, and learning not just about, again, not just about DoD or the intelligence community, but what FBI and Homeland and even places like EPA and HHS and transportation and all these different agencies, what they were doing in cybersecurity. That was what led the Obama administration to ask me to move from OMB to the National Security Council staff and become the special assistant to the president for cybersecurity. And it was really because of that understanding of how the money worked, um, and understanding how resources get allocated and how programs operate within the US government. That was why I got asked to take on that role.
Excellent. Did you have like a favorite program that you've seen throughout your career or like something really unique that the US government did?
Well, it's interesting because the one of the things you learn when you work at OMB and you see all these different programs, and even outside of your issue area, you have colleagues across the building that work on just programs that seem radically different. And it is just it never ceases to amaze me how broad the US government is. And when you really look at all the different functions that it performs, and you have, you know, everything from experts in like standards, like literally measurement standards at the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, to people who are working, you know, on, in the Fish and Wildlife Service, to those that are doing service provisions, to our military, to it's truly an astounding operation. And I think one of the things that I, very much came to appreciate is that while I know that there are certainly those working in the federal government that fit the stereotype of a bureaucrat. But the truth is that the vast majority of people that I dealt with were very dedicated people who actually worked far many more hours than a lot of people in the private sector. In fact, in many of the jobs and in many of the agencies that I worked for, it was considered, if you actually went to the private sector, that was how you actually got more time with your family, right? The and so this idea that and this is true not just in the national security area. I mean, this is whether you're talking law enforcement or scientists or other things. There are many people that are incredibly dedicated to their issue areas. And that sense of mission and that sense of purpose that really drives things, it's truly astounding.
Yeah, I've been just looking at the many different types of government jobs there are, and yeah, the many different missions that you can dedicate yourself to. And I have so much respect for the people who really, yeah, put so many more hours in to protect the American public or to make sure that the wildlife is cared for. Yeah, a lot of respect for them. So when we're talking about their personal mission, how does your work now support your? Is it meaningful or does it support your personal mission or purpose?
Sure. So now I run a nonprofit called the Cyber Threat Alliance, and we focus on enabling cybersecurity providers to share threat intelligence with each other. And our mission is really to do three things as a nonprofit. One is to enable our member companies, to the ones that we work with, to do a better job at what they do, right? But secondly, we work to support activities to disrupt and impose costs on our adversaries in cyberspace. And three, we work to raise the level of cybersecurity across our digital ecosystem. So we are very much a mission driven organization. Our mission is really about how do we actually make cyberspace safer for everyone. We're doing it from a nonprofit sector perspective rather than a government perspective, which is different. But I still think it has a lot of value, and there are actually things that nonprofits can do that for-profit companies or government agencies can't do. That's also true for government agencies and for-profit companies. You actually need that entire ecosystem to be working together. And so, in fact, the fact that I have experience in government is actually very valuable to making CTA operate the way that it does. But yes, we are very much out. All of my team would tell you that they're part of a bigger mission to you know make the internet and cyberspace a safer place for everyone.
And what was the original inspiration, or was there a moment where you were like, "I see a real need for this," when you were starting the Cyber Threat Alliance?
Well, it was interesting because when I was getting ready to leave government at the end of the Obama administration, the it really became obvious that, in fact, actually, we had sharing organizations that had been set up for financial services, so banks, for healthcare companies, for energy companies, for retail, organizations. But strangely, there was no sharing organization for the sector that arguably probably needed to be sharing the information the most, which was cybersecurity. And so that was really that realization, and along with the opportunity, because several of our founding members, so companies like Palo Alto and Fortinet and Symantec and McAfee, Checkpoint and Cisco, had already agreed at that point. Their CEOs, the leadership of those entities, had already seen a need for something like CTA. And so they were already working to put together the Cyber Threat Alliance and make it into a real organization. And so they approached me and said, we understand that you're leaving government. We've got this opportunity for you. And it seemed like a great opportunity to, not only continue to work in a mission driven organization, but also to learn the skills about how do you start a business, um, how do you build a small business, and that is what CTA is. It's also a small business, and so I've learned many of the things that um, are many of the issues that you have to deal with when you're a small business owner. I deal with too. So
Excellent. Um, and then my last question, do you have any advice for those, of us, or I guess I've already kind of entered the workforce, but, those who are entering the workforce right now and kind of graduating college and choosing their next steps?
I would say be open to possibilities and to be open to things that might be outside of what you might sort of initially think your career path is going to be. Certainly, if you'd asked me when I was a senior in college, if, when I was, 50 something years old, would I be running a cybersecurity nonprofit? I would have looked like, first of all, like the what? Like, I mean, you know, um, the, your career path, some people will have their career path mapped out, and that is fine, but for many of us, like, that was, your career path is not set in stone, and you have many opportunities to try different things and to be open to different possibilities that come your way. And so, while certainly it's important to think about your career, I think it's also important not to be so rigid in your thinking, because it is also very likely that the things you will be doing by the time you're my age don't even exist yet. And so that just makes for a lot of really interesting possibilities. I think the other thing I would just say is that not everything is going to arrive all at once. It takes time to build expertise and to build relationships and to build the kind of foundation that you want. And so the fact that you may not be exactly where you want to be a year out of college, like, that's okay too.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to a career in something that hasn't been invented yet. I think we're already seeing that with, like, AI and all of that,
And
just in the past couple of years.
yep,
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and thank you for helping us meet our mission.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.